The Toronto Blue Jays win the second game of the series against the Milwaukee Brewers, but are we convinced that this win can spark the momentum for the Toronto Blue Jays? We'll get into all of that coming up.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items apply. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit, only available for U.S. customers. So obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, it says I'm Braden Nowalsko and that is Carter Fuerst. But if you've been watching this podcast for a long enough time, you'll realize that that is not correct. So I am your host, Carter Fuerst, and we are joined again by Skyler Peters. Nice to have you on again. I'm a huge Blue Jays fan, obviously, just following this team, the roller coaster of a season that this has been so far. Skyler, how you feeling so far after this Toronto Blue Jays first two games of the series and a big win today?
Yeah, I figured it would probably be a split for the Jays in the first two games. Would have been nice to get a win with your ace on the mound last night, but for the second time in a week, playing a guy making his MLB debut, and actually Yusei Kikuchi, his opposing starting pitcher, being a guy making his MLB debut, as we saw the same thing last Thursday, I believe it was, against the O's back at Rogers Center. So, not too displeased with the way it's gone. It was kind of the average loss for the Jays last night, and it was kind of the average win today. 32-10 now, scoring 3+ runs. Your Toronto Blue Jays score 3 runs tonight. You don't allow any. It was all about the guys on the bump for sure, and they even the series.
That's an absolutely insane stat. I saw that as well today. It's 3 runs is not a lot. Let's be honest.
No.
For an offense that has been struggling all season, you can go 32-10 scoring 3 runs. It's just absolutely insane that this offense has been this bad. And that just goes to show how good these starters have been. Like, you imagine we had the offense of the Baltimore Orioles, the New York Yankees. Let's not even go there. The Milwaukee Brewers. Imagine we had that offense. How good this team could be if they actually had consistent offense in the series and across the entire season. For me in this game, yeah, like you said, it's just the typical Toronto Blue Jays win. You have unbelievable pitching. Yusei Kikuchi kind of working out of jams all night, but finds a way to put up 5 scoreless. Again, gets hit in the back of the knee. I was a little bit worried for him in that inning, but he shook everyone off, pushed John Schneider back to the dugout. That was huge to see. Looking at Yariel Rodriguez, this guy, looking at his stats in AAA, I guess I'll just start there. A 5.17 ERA, over 62 2/3 innings pitched. That's not great. And the AAA is a league where you have MLB guys that are sort of coming to the end of their careers, more of a pitcher's league. All of the young talent is normally in AA. So a guy that has an over 5 ERA in the AAA league, you think that Toronto Blue Jays offense could get to this guy. But if you know anything about the Toronto Blue Jays, as soon as they have a pitcher that they have never seen before, that has never pitched in the MLB before, seems to give them a lot of problems. But going into that, the Toronto Blue Jays somehow fend off the Milwaukee Brewers. As I said, Yusei Kikuchi had a little bit of struggles this inning, but the Brewers were 0-8 against Yusei Kikuchi with runners in scoring position. So that's a huge stat. Obviously, Yusei Kikuchi threw some good pitches when it mattered. How'd you feel about Yusei Kikuchi's start so far today?
Well, you could tell really early on in the first that he was going to have to battle tonight. I was pretty impressed with this stuff, really impressed with the fastball. Saw it touch 98 a couple of times. Didn't get the calls a lot. There were a couple of, strike calls were bad either way for either team. So I think Rodriguez and some of the Brewers relievers were kind of victim to this too. But Yusei had a couple of pitches. He had one low right in the middle on what should have been a strike 3 call to get, I think, a big second out. And that one was called a ball. And, heads up play, Danny Jansen, with the language barrier and everything, just pointed at his pitcher, told him, yeah, that was a good pitch. You didn't get the call you needed there. John Schneider, getting on the guys too much in terms of the umpiring after the game. I said it's a tough thing. Said there's 30 guys, including himself, that have a tough time with the umpires all the time, and he kind of gave them the benefit of the doubt. Definitely did go both ways, but to see the velo from Yusei was awesome. Little bit of a tougher time controlling it, especially the first 2 innings. Career or season high 4 walks. The fact that 4 walks is his season high based on how this guy started his Blue Jays career 2 years ago is just shows you what a good place we're in with the whole pitching staff. But him being maybe a top 3 guy for us if we're looking at a potential playoff rotation. So I was actually more impressed with this start than the one last Thursday against Baltimore, where he threw all 4 of his pitches really well and really fought to get through 6 innings. I thought the fact he got through 5 after throwing, I think, 50 on the nose through 2 and getting out of 2 jams and ending with a 0 on the board was really impressive.
Yeah, he has bases loaded in the first inning, works out of that, allows the first 2 runners to reach in the second inning, gets out of that as well. And Yusei Kikuchi throwing 98 from the left side just does numbers, man. That's absolutely insane to watch. A fireballer lefty, a guy that completely turned his career around in the last 2 seasons. Just such a fun guy to watch, a guy that you can tell on the mound cares so much about this team. And going back 2 years ago, this guy was willing to go down to AAA. He literally said, hey, I'm not doing well. I'm not pitching as well as I should be. I'm not hurting the team. Send me down. I'll work on my stuff. That's exactly the type of player this Toronto Blue Jays team needs. And it kind of sucks that he's pitching so well and he's in the last year of his career.
Yeah.
Toronto Blue Jays payroll, the 8th highest in baseball. I don't know if they're necessarily going to throw any more money at Yusei Kikuchi. Very well deserving. He's going to get paid wherever he goes. Probably will end up somehow on the Yankees or the Dodgers. Just the most thing of all time. But I just wanted to get into this guy's stat line. So 5 innings pitched, 3 hits, 4 walks, which he said the highest of his season, 0 runs, which is the biggest thing, 5 Ks and 97 pitches. His ERA is down to 3.26 this season. And not only Yusei Kikuchi looked good on the mound, the bullpen did absolutely numbers today as well. Nate Pearson looked disgusting today. Again, this guy, another fireballer, throwing 100, touching 101. The location looked great today. He was throwing his slider on the outside of the plate. And the swings that he was getting from this Milwaukee Brewers lineup reminded me a little bit of Bo Bichette when he's just swinging at junk sliders low and away. And that's a tough comparison to say for me as a Toronto Blue Jays fan, but it definitely was fun to watch Nate Pearson. So I'll just give it back to you. Just about the bullpen. Who was the most fun to watch so far today for the bullpen?
Yeah, probably Nate, because I think it's, a guy that we know can do it, but we haven't seen it as much. Yimi Garcia comes and gets the Blue Jays out of a jam, 2 big outs 1 big out on 2 big strike calls in the bottom of the 8th. And then obviously, the full 3 outs and for the 4-pitch save in the 9th after Trevor Richards didn't have his best. I'd be in between probably Chad Green for me, because he came out there and threw 6 pitches and was out of the inning on 3 balls in play that, never were really threatening. Nice play by Davis Schneider on the 3rd catch there, and I think that was the 7th inning, if I remember correctly. But Pearson, sitting down the side, 4 batters that he faced in the 5th or the 6th inning rather, and to strike out the 3 guys for the 3 outs was super impressive. You go from Yusei velo from the left side to the right side, and Nate Pearson with the velo. I thought that was a really tough matchup. I don't know what's in the the Miller Lights these guys are drinking or the hot dogs in Milwaukee, but these guys have certainly brought the heat over the last 2 nights.
Yeah, maybe it was the beers that they probably had on the plane going from Oakland to Milwaukee. And just
looking at me. Flight. That's a long flight. There's time for one for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And the vibes had to have been high. You get a huge win. Obviously, IKF with that legacy game back then. But looking at Nate Pearson, over his last 7 games, has a 3 ERA, over 9 innings pitched, giving up 7 hits, 11 strikeouts, and 1 walk. That's the biggest thing for me with Nate Pearson. He's not losing batters. And another huge thing I saw today is this guy just wasn't missing over the middle. And that's Nate Pearson's biggest flaw, in my opinion, is that when he makes a bad pitch, it is a middle fastball, a middle slider. And as we see, I was watching the Phillies highlights as well. Kyle Schwarber just taking advantage of middle pitches. So do all these other players in the MLB. When you throw middle pitches to MLB level talent, it's usually not going to go too well for you. Nate Pearson looked absolutely unbelievable. Saying again, anyone on this pitching staff you could give your flowers to, because everyone's getting zeros. But one guy that we have talked about a lot on this podcast, a guy that is making huge dividends with the injury to Jordan Romano, and that is Yimi Garcia. Just again, looked absolutely filthy today. A 4-out save from the guy. What more can you ask for? As soon as Yimi Garcia came in today, I knew the Blue Jays were winning this game. You could tell by the first pitch he threw, he was on his stuff. And just looking at Yimi Garcia's season stats here, he has now a 1.98 ERA over 27 and 3rd innings, 37 strikeouts, and a whip of .66. This, honestly, for me, it's going to be tough for Jordan Romano to come back and close for this team. John Schneider has his allegiances to Jordan Romano. And again, I love Jordan Romano. I think he had a rough start to the season, obviously being injured in spring training. Didn't really get his footing under him, but Yimi Garcia has been absolutely filthy to start the season.
Well, it's come at a huge time for the Blue Jays with Romano on the IL, but also with Eric Swanson struggling, not even on this ball club right now. And a guy that last year was your bona fide, like you knew who was coming in the 8th to set up. It was Eric Swanson. You knew who was coming in the 9th to hopefully shut the door. And it was Jordan Romano. At least now when you get Romano back, whether or not Yimi Garcia is a trade piece or whether or not he's a guy that's going to help you crawl out of this 2-game back hole in the wild card, he's probably the most important guy on the pitching staff in terms of an individual because, out of the starters, out of 4 out of 5 of them right now, with that 5th one up in the air, something we'll get to here in the episode in a couple of minutes, we know what we're going to get with those guys, 90% of the time. With this bullpen, it's a little less certain, but Yimi Garcia is a guy that will step on the bump. And, I think Blue Jays fans, certainly the two of us, and I know Braden's the same, have full confidence in him to get the job done, even it being a 4-out save with inheriting a couple of runners from Trevor Richards. I really wasn't all that concerned. And then nice by Danny Jansen to get that big double in the top of the 9th as well to just kind of give the Jays a little extra cushion, turn that 2-run lead into a 3-run one. And Yimi certainly looked loose in the 9th after getting out of that jam and, never gave the Brewers a chance.
And that's exactly what you need from this bullpen. When we always say this on this podcast, when you have an offense as mediocre as the Toronto Blue Jays, you got to expect 3 runs. You got to expect sometimes 2 runs. You might get lucky sometimes, get 4 or 5 runs, a couple 9-run spots. But overall, this offense doesn't really put up runs. So looking at this Brewers team, this offense is not a bad offense. Christian Yelich is raking. Wilson Contreras is also raking. There's so many good players on this team. They're 3rd in the NL in stolen bases as well. A team that can run is very good at manufacturing runs. So the fact that this Toronto Blue Jays bullpen and starting pitching was able to keep this Milwaukee Brewers team off the board is huge for obviously the Toronto Blue Jays on their road back to 500. We continue to try to get back there. We're 1 game away. Hopefully they can win this series tomorrow or today as we send out this podcast and get back to 500 and start to climb out of this hole. So far on the podcast, we've really focused on the bullpen, the starting pitchers. So let's get a little bit into the offense. Spencer Horwitz, the guy I really want to talk about. The guy's been absolutely raking. So we're going to get into all that coming up. Here on Locked On Blue Jays, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's in the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's really year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether it's you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/locked-on. See the link in the episode description below. Today's episode is also sponsored by Prize Picks. I've watched pretty much every Toronto Blue Jays game this season, and when I watch the Toronto Blue Jays games with my friends, we always find ourselves predicting the next outcome with at-bats, whether it's a strikeout, a hit, a home run, or a double play in a big situation, which we become very accustomed with this Toronto Blue Jays offense. We're always making these little wagers, but with Prize Picks, they give me the opportunity to not just prove myself to my friends, but put my money where my mouth is. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your Prize Picks entries, whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs to your pick of more than or less than, and add them to your Prize Picks entry today. Prize Picks is very simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in as little as 60 seconds. If you know which players are going to perform on specific nights, this is a no-brainer. Download Prize Picks and start making your picks today. So you can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit matchup to $100. It's code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit matchup to $100. All right, so we really focused on the pitching in this first segment, which is totally fair because you throw 9 innings of scoreless ball. You got to give the pitching some flowers. But a guy that's just been such a difference maker, continuing his tear from AAA on the Toronto Blue Jays, is Spencer Horwitz. This guy's been an absolute pleasure to watch. And normally, if you're calling up somebody from AAA for your offense and they're hitting in the 1 spot, hitting in the 2 spot, probably not the best thing for your offense. It usually means that your offense is struggling, which clearly the Toronto Blue Jays offense is struggling. But looking at Spencer Horwitz, obviously a very small sample size in the MLB so far, but he has 14 at-bats, a 357 average, 1 RBI, and an OPS of 900. Just absolutely ridiculous. A guy that is giving me a little bit of Davis Schneider vibes, minus the power, obviously. We've been pretty blessed as Toronto Blue Jays fans. You're pulling up people from AAA, and they're making an immediate impact on this team. How do you feel about Spencer Horwitz and his performance so far this season?
Yeah, I thought he was probably, kind of the spark plug for the Jays offensively tonight, obviously, giving them an option or an opportunity to get some guys in and early on in this game too, against a young pitcher that, it could certainly get into a situation where he got a little bit flustered. And we did see that in the first 4 innings out of the young guy out there today. Sorry, his name's kind of escaping me at the moment. Rodriguez. I don't know what the long-term solution is for the Jays at the leadoff spot because it seems like when Schneider gets up there, it kind of slows down. I do believe they said on the broadcast tonight, Danner or Joe said that the 2 games that Spencer Horwitz has led off, Schneider didn't start either of them. Schneider did get in a bat later in this game and obviously made that nice catch in left field that I mentioned earlier. So we'll kind of see. I just kind of love a young guy coming up with energy, and obviously we saw that in August, to a million percentile with Schneider coming up and absolutely raking, and then riding pine for 20 days or whatever it was. But I guess we'll see. That kind of gives me some hesitancy to see what John Schneider wants to do with these young guys. Obviously, I think there's a lot of talk about Elvis Martinez, and his defense is probably the reason he's not in the MLB right now. So I'm sure he could do it with the bat. I wouldn't be surprised if it's some sort of platoon situation between these 2 guys too, and there's some roster moves that are going to need to be made, obviously, because the Jays are going to get their closer back, that sort of thing as well. So we'll see. But I think I'd be really impressed if Spencer Horwitz could spend maybe the rest of the month of June leading off 2 out of every 3 games. You give that back to Schneider. You got to figure out what to do, obviously, with George Springer, who's just batting a little bit over 200 right now. He's buried in the order. But it's a lot worse to have guys that aren't playing well and having to put a guy in the leadoff spot than having guys that seem to be doing okay with it in small samples and just trying to figure out that mix. And that's kind of where John Schneider's at with these guys right now.
Yeah, it's nice that John Schneider is actually taking the fans' advice and playing the hot hands, because for me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Spencer Horwitz has been raking so far from the leadoff spot. And a left-handed bat, this offense needed so desperately. You look at Dalton Varsho, he is a good left-handed bat, but not a guy that's ever going to hit for average. Spencer Horwitz is known for hitting for average. He hits singles, he hits backside doubles, whatever you need from Spencer Horwitz. He can play 2-bag, which he's pretty much just never played in his career. Plays a lot of 1-bag, so that does have some lineup complications with Justin Turner, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. But at this point, with this offense, with how good the defense is, with how good the pitching is, at this point, screw defense. Obviously can't say screw pitching because you need good pitching with this offense.
Especially this team.
Yeah, especially this team. We need this pitching to keep going. Yeah. We need Kikuchi, Rios, all these guys to keep continuing to be dominant. But when you're looking at this offense, you got to go all in. You got to get your best 9 offensively in the ball game. And I think that's what John Schneider has been doing. He's kind of just dealing with the hand that has been dealt. And one thing that you sort of briefly went over in the first segment is the Toronto Blue Jays have this thing where it seems like they score fairly early on in the game and then they just never score again. Their bats go completely flat. And you look at this 9th inning and Danny Jansen comes through with a massive double. I'm not saying that this run changed the game, but it definitely makes you feel a lot better going into the 9th inning with a 3-run cushion compared to a 2-run cushion. Because you get 1 walk, you get 1 single, and all of a sudden, 1 swing can change the entirety of the ball game. So that was a huge thing for me watching this Toronto Blue Jays game. Danny Jansen coming in a huge clutch situation and just smacking a pull side double down the line. I love to see anything pull side from Dalton Varsho, Danny Jansen. Those are the 2 best guys that do it on the Toronto Blue Jays. Always fun to watch. But one thing I do want to go into a little bit of a negative here, and you brought him up. It is Davis Schneider. Unfortunately, it is Braden's guy. Sorry, Braden, you can't defend him here. I'm going to go a little bit in on Davis Schneider. Hasn't been great recently. On the broadcast, I think they said he was 0 for 18 at this point in his last 18 at-bats, and this pretty much is elaborated in his last 7 games. So over his last 7, he's 1 for 21. That's simply just not going to cut it. I mean, Davis Schneider's been a good hitter, so I'm not going to go too hard on him. He's probably one of the best hitters on the Toronto Blue Jays, and this just happens in baseball. You're going to go through hot highs, you're going to go through lows, you're going to have slumps. But looking at his last 15, looking at his last 30, over his last 30, he's 20 for 108, which 185 average with a 276 OBP and a slugging of 361. And this kind of attributes to this leadoff problem. George Springer obviously is not the answer. You're looking at Bo Bichette, hasn't been exactly what you want, not necessarily a leadoff hitter anyway. Davis Schneider, again, has been good at times in the leadoff spot, but you really want someone that can hit for the high average, that can get on base consistently. Maybe Spencer Horwitz is that option, especially right now with how good he's hitting. But it's going to be interesting with this lineup construction. Me and Dallin went over this a little bit yesterday. I think we both had Spencer Horwitz leading off for the time being, and that's just what you got to do. You just got to play the hot hand. Do you have anything else to add? Just something that you saw from the offense? Anything positive, hopefully, to give maybe a little bit of a spin zone for this offensive team?
No, you know what? I'm not going to go the other way on the offense itself, but there were a lot of plays on the base paths defensively for the Brewers that kind of allowed the Blue Jays into it. There was a drop ball on a great throw from third that should have been picked up by Rhys Hoskins that allowed a base runner on. There were two middle infielders kind of crossing over and almost interfering with each other on I think it was a slow grounder by Danny Jansen. It was one of the slower Jays anyway that allowed him to reach on first, things like that. So the Jays kind of got some luck playing into their hands, and hey, we'll take it for a team that's two games out of a wild card spot and, hasn't showed us a whole lot consistently throughout the year. The one thing I will say about Schneider, though, and I was actually looking over to my other screen while you were talking about him, because anytime you load up Baseball Savant, you go to the batters page and just look at some of the fancier stats for the Blue Jays. I know Davis Schneider, and one of the biggest ones that a lot of analytics folks will tell you to take a look at is the amount of balls that are barreled per plate appearance. 8.6 leads the Blue Jays batters. And actually, the guy behind him is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So he's putting the bat on the ball, and he's putting the middle of the bat on the ball, and he's having a lot of tough luck too. I think Davis Schneider will be fine. I hope the Jays have a lot of patience with him. I think it's tough when you bring up another young guy with options that's playing well and outplaying him right now, obviously, and that's Spencer Horwitz. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Jays do over the next 7 to 10 days with this lineup. But I think if we can just find ways to get that second, third run, in the second, third inning when you got base runners on the base paths already, it seems like they kind of have the right formula for getting these guys over and in, but it just hasn't happened yet. And, to see some crooked numbers from these guys, especially earlier on in the games like they have been doing, and then obviously helping their pitchers close the door later in the games, more that what we've seen from Danny Jansen today would go a long way to getting this team back in the wild card race.
Yeah, especially from a guy that's making his MLB debut. You get 8 base runners in 3 2/3 innings. You only score 2 runs. I want to see the Toronto Blue Jays bury them right there. I want to see the Toronto Blue Jays score 4 runs in the inning, 5 runs in the inning, get ahead. If you want to score 5 runs in an inning and then not score the rest of the game, clearly, as you said, 32-10, they score 3 or more runs. If you can bury a team early in the game, it's going to give you momentum. It's going to kind of shut them up in a sense where they're going to be defeated. They're not going to be as fired up, obviously. And a thing that just the Toronto Blue Jays desperately needs is runs in any facet of the game.
Well, the one thing I will say about that, sorry to cut you off, Carter, but
go for it.
At that point in the second inning, Yusei Kikuchi's thrown 49 pitches. Like, we didn't know he was going to battle back, get you through 5 scoreless at that time. Like, we thought maybe there was somebody coming in, in the third inning or after 3 innings. So for the fact that, the Jays at that time could have put up 4 or 5 runs and given their bullpen a big cushion would have been huge. Obviously, it worked out tonight, and I don't think we'll see a whole lot of, Jay starters only going 3 1/3 or anything like that the rest of the way, hopefully. But that was an opportunity kind of missed, and it worked out for the Jays tonight, but something that it wasn't lost on me as we watched that game unfold.
Yeah, so I think we've talked enough about the Toronto Blue Jays offense. It's just kind of the same thing that's been happening all year, just a mediocre, just not necessarily enough. It was enough today, but overall, I mean, you get your 3 runs, I guess, from that stat line. That is enough on this Toronto Blue Jays team. But one guy I definitely want to talk about, what an absolute day from this guy, Yariel Rodriguez. Again, it's a AAA start. This is disgusting. He had faced 15 batters and struck out 10 of them. I think that is just gross. I wish I was watching that game with Yariel Rodriguez on the mound. That's absolutely insane. His fastball sat at 94, up to 95, got 4 whiffs on 6 swings, threw 67 pitches. I think this guy, I was going to get into the debate. I'll flat out ask you this. Is Yariel Rodriguez your 5th starter when he comes back on the Toronto Blue Jays roster?
Yeah, I think he has to be. I don't know what, the construction looks like if you need a longer guy, to kind of also be in that bullpen and be ready because, as we've seen throughout the year with Yariel Rodriguez, this is a guy that didn't pitch at all last year and he's not super stretched out even now in the middle of June. And, this is a guy that at the end of the year, you're going to have some question marks about it. How many innings can this guy throw overall? And, obviously coming off an injury in the early part of the season, you can't ignore 66% of his batters just going back to the dugout, sitting the F down. That's absolutely insane when they mentioned that on the broadcast. So sooner rather than later, Yariel Rodriguez back on the bump. Jay's got a pretty big homestand to start here on the weekend against the Cleveland Guardians. Is he your guy on Sunday? Probably. You mentioned off the air that John Schneider had considered maybe moving up Jose Barrios, even with the off day on Thursday. That would allow Rodriguez to, I think, get a normal start on Sunday for him as well, and kind of settle in this Jays rotation as it stands. Knock on wood that it stays fairly healthy from here on in. But I can't think it can be anybody but Yariel Rodriguez after watching that.
Oh, absolutely. And you don't need Yariel Rodriguez to go 7 innings every single time out, especially when you're going to have Bowden Francis. You got Trevor Richards, who can be a long man in this rotation, or in this bullpen rather. But yeah, like with Yariel Rodriguez, with how gross that was, I mean, I think it's a no-brainer, honestly, at this point. You got to throw him in. And with Bowden Francis' struggles since he's been back, and honestly, over the entire season, they didn't have a good outing against the Oakland Athletics, but at the end of the day, it is the Oakland Athletics. Their offense is not that good. But it's just definitely a good thing to see from this Toronto Blue Jays pitching staff. If you can get a solid 5 rotation, which has been the entirety of the year with Alek Manoah, with Trevor Richards when he's been thrown in that role as an opener, they've really been very good at giving this team chances to win pretty much every single time out. So that has been awesome to see. It's going to be an interesting decision from John Schneider and company. I think you got to lean to Yariel Rodriguez after what we've seen. But with John Schneider and his track record, you never know what's going to happen. Hopefully this is more of a front office decision, which I think it will be, rather than a John Schneider decision. Hopefully there's a collaboration and they do the right thing and they throw Yariel Rodriguez on that Sunday against the Cleveland Guardians. Saying that, we do have a few more things to talk about. We have one more game of this Milwaukee Brewers series. And before we do head into the break, I actually want to bring this up. Kevin Kiermaier does exit the game in the 5th inning after a foul ball off his knee. A guy that has had injury problems in the past. Just a tough break from Kevin Kiermaier. But again, I love Kevin Kiermaier, but this might be a blessing in disguise in a sense if he does miss time, because he is so defensively sound, one of the best defensive players in this league. But for a team that needs offense so desperately, you can't just leave Kevin Kiermaier on the bench for like 7 games set. Like you need to play him probably every 3rd day at minimum. But definitely a tough scene in Milwaukee with Kevin Kiermaier getting hurt again.
Yeah, just tried to lay down a bunt, I believe, and took a foul ball off the kind of the inside of the knee. John Schneider said post-game that was the 2nd time he's done that this season. I couldn't remember the first, but hey, I will give my hats off to the guy because he stays in there. Is at a point, and Joe Siddall said it while we're kind of watching him hobble around, and I've felt this before, not playing ball, but in other scenarios, like take a puck off the knee in hockey or something like that, like the whole thing just turns cold, and you can't even stand on it. And that was his back leg too. So I was super impressed that he stayed in there and then ended up getting base hit and didn't leave the game immediately either. I'm sure this is probably one of those ones that's not going to feel a whole lot better tomorrow. It's probably going to feel worse. Obviously, an earlier game with a 2:10 Eastern or a 1:10 Eastern start, 2:10 Central for this final game of the 3-game set. Day off after that, and then you start a pretty big homestand. I can't imagine he's in the lineup for the Jays tomorrow, and this will maybe help that roster shake out and maybe help him come back, take care of anything else that might be going on, because there's a lot of it in the baseball season, and maybe try and find his stroke a little bit better for the Jays offensively. Yeah,
you definitely don't want to rush Kevin Kiermaier back with his injury history and just how good he is in the outfield. And like I said, the defense isn't the problem. Davis Schneider, again, today makes an insane diving catch in the outfield. Dalton Varsho, I mean, I don't have to say anything about that. George Springer, maybe having his best defensive season ever in his career, making it seems like a diving catch every single series. So this team is fine defensively. Again, that's why nothing against Kevin Kiermaier. I love the guy, a fan favorite across Toronto Blue Jays Nation. But for a team that just needs to completely sell out for offense, I think this can be a blessing in disguise in a sense. But saying that, I do want to get into this last game of the Milwaukee Brewers series. But just before we do head into that, I wanted to shout out our Locked On 24/7 streaming channel, whether it's Locked On Sports Today or the Amazon Fire TV's channel app, whether it's the WNBA, NFL, NHL, obviously the Stanley Cup Finals are going on, the MLB. And the NBA finals are also going on. If you guys are at all interested in that, head over to one of those channels, whatever is more convenient for you to digest some expert analysis. So we're going to get into the last game of the Toronto Blue Jays and the Milwaukee Brewers series coming up. Take care of all your vehicular maintenance needs with our partner, eBay Motors. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Whether it's a new spoiler, new brakes, a new alternator, or you just want to deck out your ride, eBay Motors will have everything you need. They're super easy to deal with, very knowledgeable, and their experts give great advice that is specific to your needs. To keep your ride or die alive with eBay Motors, go to ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available for U.S. customers. All right, this is as close as you can get to the road to 500. We are one game away. Hopefully this Toronto Blue Jays team can get back to 500. I feel like I don't have the exact stat, but it's definitely been over a month and a half since this team has been at 500. And looking at the standings, I know it is super early, but technically the Toronto Blue Jays are in third place in the AL East now after that win today. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Rays struggling. They got swept by the Baltimore Orioles. I think they might have came back actually in the ninth. I know they were making a run at it, but they are underneath the Blue Jays. The Boston Red Sox have the same record. So again, it is very early on. We're only just over 60 games into the season. A lot of baseball to be played, but hopefully you can get a series win from the Milwaukee Brewers, a team that's going to be in the playoffs, a team that who knows if somehow this team can catch fire. You never know what can happen in baseball. You just got to get to the dance. Say somehow the Toronto Blue Jays make the World Series, maybe a team you might see there. They have a ton of pitching injuries. A lot of people will be coming back. Devin Williams is out, which is huge for this Toronto Blue Jays team. He's gross. Brandon Woodruff, another guy that's out. But saying this, we got the Hound on the mound for today's game against Tobias Myers. Chris Bassett has a 3.8 ERA. Obviously, his last start out, he went 8 innings, somehow got a no decision. That is absolutely terrible, but that is so typical for this Toronto Blue Jays team.
Then what happened, Carter?
Yeah, and then Chad Green comes in, throws one pitch. Imagine, let's just go back into that quickly. Imagine you're doing your whole pregame routine. You're probably throwing your sequence. You're throwing like your warm-up pitches. You're probably using medicine balls. You go in, you throw one pitch, and just see you later.
And to Chad Green's credit, another quick outing today, but in the better way. He got 3 outs.
Hey, Chad Green was just a little tired. He didn't want to overthrow his arm, didn't want to get injured again. So he's just like, screw it. I'll just throw a meatball down the middle. We'll get out of the series. We'll end up winning it anyway. Maybe he knows a little bit more than we do on this podcast. God, I hope he does. But yeah, so what's your expectation for today's game against the Milwaukee Brewers?
Yeah, and I knew Myers had a pretty good start. I just remember hearing about that, which looked like it was Friday against the Tigers. 5 strikeouts, 1 hit, 3 walks. I think that was his 4th start of the year, something like that. His season RA went from 5.10 to 4.15 just after that good start. So he's a young pitcher. Obviously, he's got good stuff, and he's coming off, probably the best start in his young career. But this is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Is obviously one of the most consistent pitchers in baseball over the course of his career, and obviously the most experienced guy in terms of starters on this pitching staff in Chris Bassett. Just overall looking at this series, looking at the way the Brewers have kind of played offensively, this bullpen had to throw a lot of innings today. It is the most overworked bullpen in the league in terms of the Brewers I'm speaking about here, of course. And you got a vet on the mound that can give you 7-8 again for the Blue Jays. It's all systems go for them with a day and a half off before starting a big homestand as well. Other than Kevin Kiermaier, everybody that came into this game today certainly should be available for them tomorrow in terms of the pitchers as well. And, I think with Vladdy going 0 for 5 today, Bo quietly 2 for 4. If you get 2 big hits from Vladdy, Bo puts together some better at bats. We see the same kind of thing in the leadoff spot from Spencer Horwitz. I think this team should get the second win in this series win, and then kind of go home on a high and try to, get things going after getting back to 500 with some big series, 4 straight against either the Cleveland Guardians or the Boston Red Sox after this.
Oh, we always talk so much about momentum, and this is how you build that momentum. You get a series win against a playoff team. You're going to the Cleveland Guardians, who have people raking, obviously a great pitching staff as well. Josh Naylor's going insane. Jose Ramirez.
Again from Josh Naylor.
Did he home run again today?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
my God.
He's an absolute freak.
This guy's insane.
He's actually a psychopath, but I love him. And he's Canadian, so we got to cheer for him.
Oh, you got to get on your Canadian boys. You got to support him, obviously. And I don't know if you saw that soundbite from one of the home runs he hit. I don't think I could say it on this podcast because there was a lot of bad words in that soundbite, but it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I love when baseball players get fired up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the one where he smashed the bat on his helmet and then like two hands spiked it into the ground down the first baseline after hitting a dong is one of the funniest clips I've seen this year. So please don't homer over the weekend. I'm going to watch 2 out of the 3 games live, but do it any other time.
Yeah, and one thing I want to get into before we do head out is just how much, again, I kind of love this about the Toronto Blue Jays fan base, but how much we overreact so quickly. Chris Bassitt, his first 2 starts, gave up 4 earned runs, kind of bounced back in his next 3, but then goes against the Dodgers, which obviously have a very good offense. He gives up 7 earned runs. I think at that point, he had like a 5.5 ERA. And some people are like, oh, Chris Bassitt sucks. Chris Bassitt sucks. Look at him now. This guy, like, just look at his career. Again, it is like, you have a small sample size. You can't really base the season off of anything else other than what you have watched. So I do understand it from that perspective. But look at Chris Bassitt now, just a guy that's just throwing one of the most consistent pitchers in all of baseball, and definitely one of the most consistent pitchers on the Toronto Blue Jays. A guy that throws a million pitches. You're never going to be able to guess what he's throwing next. And a guy that's just such a strategist, just a student of the game, and so good at what he does. But yeah, this is a big series for the Toronto Blue Jays, a big win. Like you said, we got a gauntlet coming up. The Cleveland Guardians, such a good team. The Boston Red Sox, I guess you could definitely argue that one a little bit, but it's an AL East opponent. The Toronto Blue Jays have a history of not playing very well against AL East opponents, and they have a couple pitchers on that roster that are pitching very well for the Boston Red Sox. But let's worry about the game at hand. We got the Milwaukee Brewers. Let's just get back to 500. I just want to be in the hunt. We're 2 games away from a playoff spot, but again, it is only June. Do you got anything else to add before we wrap up here for today?
The one thing I'll say about a Bassitt start tomorrow coming off the Kikuchi and Pearson pairing is like this team could not, the Brewers that is, couldn't keep up with the fastball. Obviously, Yusei was, touching some pretty incredible numbers. I think it was a full mile per hour over his season average velo with the fastball. And then we also have what Pearson did as well in the 6th inning. It'll be interesting to see because you go from guys that are throwing absolute diesel to Chris Bassitt, who's kind of, more the strategist. And, the velo is not exactly there. So big change of pace for these Brewers bats, and it'll be interesting to see how their manager Murphy kind of lets them adjust not only with the lineup but how they do it at the plate. I do think this is going to be a close game, but the kind of game the Blue Jays team that wants to get back in this playoff picture really needs to win it and show us something. So I'm really excited for this one, and hey, love watching a game while I'm at work at 2:07, but hopefully the boss isn't listening.
Yeah, hopefully he's not, because I know Braden does that a lot as well. I'll throw him under the bus with you just in case somehow he is listening. But if Chris Bassitt, I don't even want to put this out into the world, so I'm going to knock on wood here already. But Chris Bassitt shouldn't change anything. But if he wants to get his higher velo, maybe he should incorporate a hop step to get that extension closer to the plate. You take off, so you get some miles per hour probably taken off, but hey, you'll get an extra 3 feet closer to the plate. It's going to be a lot harder to hit that baseball, and nobody does that anymore. So they'll probably confuse the hell out of these Milwaukee Brewers hitters. But saying that, Skyler, I just want to say one more time, thank you for joining me. It definitely helps me out a ton with Braden, just, not being committed to the podcast at all. Just absolute dog, just typical. No, but saying that, I hope he is having a good time in New York. He will be back tomorrow, whether you want him to be or don't want him to be. He is back. So he will be watching the Toronto Blue Jays game tomorrow. I believe he is off the entire day. He's probably going to be absolutely gassed. But, after watching, I think he was watching a Mets versus Marlins game today. So I just feel bad for him, just doing some charity work there at the Mets field. Definitely not something that I would have signed up for, especially after going to a Yankees-Dodgers series, just seeing all the home runs. Teoscar Hernandez obviously raking in that series. Before we do head out, just wanted to throw it over one more time to the Locked On 24/7 streaming channel. Pretty much any sport you can think of. Obviously, the big 4 sports in North America are on there. College sports, the WNBA, whatever you are interested in. Expert analysis, whether it's the NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals, 2 big finals going on right now. Perfect opportunity to take the time to get some expert analysis over there. Big game tomorrow, as I've said multiple times. We need it bad. I just want to be 500 so bad. It feels like it's been so long since we could say that we're not chasing the road to 500. And before we do head out, one more thing I wanted to add is the likes, comments, subscribers, everything you guys do to support this podcast is greatly appreciated. The debates are my favorite part of this podcast, whether you guys agree with us or disagree with us, where we get into mini arguments in the comment section. That's what I love. just kind of snap it around with the boys, the people that watch the Toronto Blue Jays every single day and ride or die with this team on a daily basis. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.